Morning. It's a very difficult act to follow. Thank you so much, Pastor Bill, again, for having me here, subjecting your people to me. And thank you to all of you at Christ Lutheran Church for all the work that you are doing for this neighborhood and the legacy that you are continuing. It's very fitting today. 60 years ago, you were a branch from our tree as Reformation began this new mission start in this neighborhood. And today you are continuing our work even as we have transitioned into this new stage of our life. All of you are here to pick up the baton and carry on the legacy. So I do want to share good news today and talk about exactly what that legacy is. So go ahead to the next slide. We're thankful for Ken Webb and for people that go before us. Martin Luther talked about this. He said that we are all brought to faith by one another. We don't just walk and get struck by lightning and go, oh, yeah, I guess I'm a believer. We are made into believers by the witness that we receive from one another. And the man pictured on the screen is Mr. Jim Skirl. He was a theology teacher at St. Ignatius High School. I did not get lucky enough to have him in a class. His senior year class was called Christian Manhood. It was an all-boy Jesuit high school in Cleveland where I attended, and it was considered almost a capstone class. I think my trajectory was I took with Dr. Michael Pennock Introduction to Biblical Interpretation in high school. That class has served me well in ministry. But Christian Manhood was the class that you wanted to take. You watched Groundhog Day. You talked about what it meant to serve others. And every lecture was basically a cross between an inspirational message and a stand-up comedy routine. How you see Mr. Skirl pictured here is how he is most often remembered. Cracking a joke, laughing, making you smile, especially when you had a hard day. And he was about 6'4". He was a championship basketball player, and he would just walk the halls as we passed through, just scanning, most of all to knock us on the head when we were doing something silly, or even more, just to kind of give us that look and pick us up and be a coach as much as a teacher. I got to know him in later years, and I was really honored that he was the one who wrote my recommendation to the ELCA to begin the candidacy process. About 10 years ago, he was diagnosed with cancer, and as he was going into the hospital, after it looked like his treatment was not going to be helpful, and he was surrounded with some of the other teachers at the school. And he said, can we take a minute and pray for everybody who has been in this bed and everybody who will be in this bed? That was the belief that he had in Jesus. That Jesus was always present for other people at their moment of extreme need. And he witnessed to this not just in the classroom. He witnessed to this in the community. He started a ministry for some of the students to get out of class, which was always exciting, but to go serve as pallbearers at cemeteries where people didn't have a lot of family or friends to be near them. So he enlisted the students to carry the bodies. And he also started a program on Sunday nights called the St. Benedict Joseph Labra Ministry, where we went to the school cafeteria, we cooked some food, we wrapped it all up, and then just drove around downtown Cleveland, especially days after Browns games, because there was a big population of unhoused that would kind of descend during the sporting event, either to, get food for people that were tailgating. Sometimes they paid the homeless to come in and kind of clean up the stadium, dry all the tears from the fans. And it was a big deal on Sunday that you went out, and we all hopped into school vans and we went. It wasn't like going to a church basement and cooking for people. His vision was you go out and you find people where they are, and he had Jesus's rules that you went out 2 by 2, and you just distributed food. And he said, even more than food, make sure to be present yourselves, because these people are lonely. And it was always it was uplifting, but it was also really fun, for teenagers to be around people who were unhoused, which kind of gave us this strange gift of walking around town and seeing people that we knew from the Labra ministry. You're going to an Indians game and you're like, oh, hey, there's Joseph. I know Joseph. I gave him a hot dog 2 weeks ago. It was a really powerful way to keep us connected. But what I remember about this ministry most was one night. Go ahead to the next slide. It was when it was November. It was beginning to get cold, and we were out by the Cleveland Convention Center, and there were a bunch of people who were kind of getting ready to sleep under the awning, because it was, those of you who moved from the east remember those misty, cold rains that kind of come that time of year. And one of the people was so upset, saying, hey, I need so much more than food. I'm scared. I'm lonely. I don't have any family. I'm all by myself, and just kept kind of repeating it. And those of us who were standing around there, a bunch of teenagers, we were kind of overwhelmed. We didn't know what to do. He started to cry and weep openly. And we were all in silence. But Mr. Skirl knelt down and grabbed this man. Remember, he's 6'4", and gave him the biggest hug I have seen one man give another man outside of Chris Farley and Tommy Boy, and just held him tight as he sobbed, as he wept. And I have to say, I've read a lot of books, been to seminary, heard a lot of people talk about Jesus. I feel like I learned so much more about Jesus in that night from Mr. Skirl than I did in all of those classes. Because here's the thing, that we can go to the next slide. Here's the thing that I have always kept, especially being a hospice chaplain. And you're in there in those moments with people when they're inconsolable because they've lost their loved one. Or I sat with a man who had kids that are probably about the same age as mine now, saying, I don't understand why God's taking me away from my children right now. You're in those moments. Nothing you can say. Nothing you can do. No magic wand that you can wave. All you can do is just be there. And be there as close as possible and as powerfully as possible. But just be present. I think so often we think about the silence of God and the silence of Jesus and the suffering of the world, whether it's a community in Georgia after a mass shooting, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's in Ukraine, whether it's in this neighborhood for a young person that is struggling to get through school because she may not know where she's spending the night. In all of those places, it's where Christ longs to be. And he's there silently, wordlessly, but yet powerfully on a place called the cross. And the cross is where Jesus gives this world and all of us, especially those of us that suffer, that big old bear hug, that holding of us that won't let go. Whether in that hospital waiting room, whether we are in our living room or at our desk wondering how we're going to pay the bills next month. It's wherever we are at our lowest, wherever we are suffering. That is where Christ is on the cross, giving us that giant embrace, giving us that giant bear hug, and not letting us go. It's hard to see sometimes. It's hard to know sometimes. He's holding on to us for one reason. He's holding on to us for that day where God will keep this promise that he made in Revelation. He said, "Behold, I am making all things new. The home of God will be with people, and people will live with God, and he will wipe every tear from their eyes." The most important part of Revelation, I hope I'm not doing a spoiler alert. The most important part of Revelation is what is waiting for us after that judgment. It is the mercy, the compassion of God who, in the midst of all that judgment, has not let go and will not let go, who is always with us. And a powerful thing happens. We as the church, go ahead to the next slide, we get to be part of that embrace. I love this image from The Chosen of Jesus cleansing a leper. We are those hands that reach out and hold on to somebody when they are in their lowest moment. We are in the eyes that dares to look at them and to say, "I see you and I acknowledge you." And we are the ears. Squeaky would love this one. We are the ears. We are the giant ears of God who are always there, listening to prayers, listening for people's needs, and we are present. This is what the church is called to be. It is not just a place to come and hang out on Sunday. It's not a place to come and get a good cup of coffee and feel good. The church is not a place. The church is Christ's embrace. You are my hands and feet. We are Christ's body. And we are also Christ's embrace. That's how Jesus continues the work that he was sent to do. It continues through us. And God bless you for being that embrace of Christ, which is present in all of those gifts, which is present in those clothes, and which is present most of all in those prayers. For the young people in this community as those heroes and saints at Garside Middle School, extend to them the dignity that they deserve as our fellow human beings. This is what we are celebrating today. And so when Jesus talks about the sheep and the goats, I always think that we mishear that. Go ahead to the next slide. See, I think it looks like this. When Jesus says, look, whatever you did to the lowest of the low, that you did to me, is not because Jesus is playing like some kind of really high stakes video game with us, right? Where Jesus is kind of like coming and like being disguised. Like, oh, will you help me? I don't know. Let's see. He's not doing that. That's Greek mythology stuff. When Jesus says, what you do to the least and the lowest, you do to me, because he's right there. He's hugging them. He's holding on to them. That's where that judgment comes in. The judgment is, are you doing this work or are you not doing this work? Are you here with me or are you off somewhere else? That's what the judgment is. Are you with Christ? Have you been so moved and transformed? Have you been so changed? Have you had your heart, which broke and fell out of your body, have you had it replaced with a new one by Christ when you were at your lowest moment? Do you now have Christ's eyes and Christ's ears and Christ's hands and Christ's embrace for the world? That's always the question that is lingering over you whenever we think about judgment. And it's not really even a question at all. It's a where are you? Are you here with me or are you somewhere else? Are you being hugged or are you just shaking hands? That's the question. The answer always is what you smell like, right? You want to be like this goat. You want to smell like the sheep. I do have to say that I learned this not only from Mr. Skrull in so many actions, but I learned it in 15 years of ministry. We can go to the next slide. At Reformation Lutheran Church, this was a picture that Channel 8 took when they came to do a news story about our closure, and I absolutely love it because it's the front door to our church going out into the neighborhood. We had our doors open. We had all sorts of people walk in. I hope that you are blessed by that as well. Hope you get all sorts of strange and wonderful people to come in here. If that's you, welcome. We'd have our doors open. Pastor Jason and Pastor Lauren and Pastor Emily and I, we knew a big part of our day would just be talking to people who came in looking straight for help. Can I get a bus pass? Can I get groceries? But even more than us, what was even more powerful was the people who were there. My wife was the youth director for my time there. And there was one Sunday where I was the only pastor. The head pastor was gone, and this girl from the youth group who had been pregnant, who had just had, she lived in the neighborhood, she had a host of problems, and she came in, about 10 minutes before worship, which is like the worst time to ever talk to your pastor, Pastor Bill. Don't ever go to your pastor 10 minutes before worship and say, I really need to talk to you. But she kind of did that, and I was not ready because I was thinking about worship, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to be with you in a second. Because I just wasn't ready, right? We're human beings. I certainly am. I try not to hide that. But I went in to the office to kind of like get vested, and I was like, okay, I'm going to have to, talk to her and tell her, after worship that we can talk or whatever. But when I went back out in the lobby, she was surrounded by about 5 of the leading ladies of the church. Do you have food? Do you have something to eat? Where are you staying right now? What can I get you? This was the church that I had the privilege of serving for 15 years. And this was the church that this community had the privilege of hosting for 75 years. I am so thankful that I got to be a part of Christ's embrace there. And I am so thankful for all of you as you continue that embrace. Amen.